Hello there, welcome back to Channel C. I'm the host of Public Square, Ann Lee, and we have a very exciting program ahead. Today my guest is Steve Orlins. He's the president of the National Committee of USChina Relations. This is an organization that has been promoting great Sino-American relations for the last 45 years. It has been in the hopes of creating constructive dialogue because it's based on the belief that stronger relations will create greater cooperation in all areas of foreign policy. So Steve, welcome. We are very happy to have you on our show.
My pleasure to join you today, Ann.
Great, wonderful. So I think I'd like to kick off the conversation by talking about something that everyone has on their mind, which is leadership change and transition. As we all know, the U.S. is having a presidential election, and we're very deep into the election cycle for major leadership change here at the U.S. And it is an unusual year because the Chinese leadership is also scheduled to have a leadership transition. And so this is the first time where we've got two major, the largest economies in the world, potentially having major leadership transitions. So I'm wondering what your opinion is. Do you think that this leadership transition will go smoothly, or do you expect that there could be possible unforeseen complications with this? And given the current lineup of potential leaders that are going to step into power, are you more optimistic about relations between U.S. and China or more pessimistic?
Well, I would make a few points. First, I would say that we don't know if President Obama will be reelected or Governor Romney will be elected President of the United States. We do know that Xi Jinping will become chairman of the Chinese Communist Party and Li Keqiang will become premier of China. So in a lot of ways, we know more about what China is going to look like at the beginning of 2013 than we do what the United States will look like. So the question is, does that transition affect the relationship between the United States and China? First, let's focus on the Chinese transition. Again, we don't know who the other members of the Standing Committee are going to be, but we know who the leadership, who the top two will be. What is clear in all of the discussions that we at the National Committee have with the Chinese leadership, the Chinese think tanks, is that there is little debate over the relationship between the United States and China. That the Chinese leadership, no matter who it is committed to a constructive relationship with the United States. The Chinese leadership, no matter who the Standing Committee is going to be, is going to focus on the problems that China has at home. And in order to focus on those problems, it needs constructive relations with the United States. It needs peace and stability in the Pacific. It needs continued trade. It needs continued investment. In other words, the status quo greatly suits the leadership in China, no matter who it is. On the U.S. side, we have slightly different policies between that President Obama has pursued and that Governor Romney suggests he would pursue if he were elected president. The most prominent of those policies is on the first day. Governor Romney has said on the first day that he is president, he will brand China a currency manipulator, which, even though it has very little substantive impact, from a symbolic point of view, that is an important statement that he is going to seek a more confrontational approach to the relationship between the United States and China. What we've seen over the last 30 years, that when a new president comes in, we often see a new American president comes in, we often see some disruption in the relationship for the first 12 months, and then we see stability in the relationship thereafter. President Obama managed to avoid that and maintain fairly strong relations during that period. That was not the case for the prior presidents, for President Clinton, for President George W. Bush, and other presidents since President Carter. President Reagan had difficulty in his first year. So if Governor Romney is elected, we might see some disruption in the first 12 months. People's hope is that if he is elected, that between the election in November and his inauguration in January, there will be changes in his policy, and he and the Chinese will work together to lay a foundation for continued constructive relations.
So you believe it's more rhetoric, possibly, because obviously economic issues often come up, and both the Romney and Obama camp have attacked China for various economic issues. Do you think that this rhetoric that is rather hostile in tone is more just political posturing and scapegoating for political purposes? And do you think that would damage relations down the road, or you just think that it was justified and it's just going to maintain stability further down the road?
What we've seen over history is the party out of power, doesn't matter if it's a Democratic Party or a Republican Party, criticizes the incumbent party for being, quote, soft on China, not pursuing sufficient trade actions, not filing enough cases with the WTO, not seeking to enforce intellectual property rights sufficiently strongly in China. So what we see is the party out of power, in this case Governor Romney, criticizing the party in power, in this case President Obama, as being too weak on China. When President Clinton was running against then President Bush, he criticized President Bush as being too soft on China, as what he called coddling the dictators of Beijing. So the party out of power is always critical. When they get in power, they recognize the complexity and diversity of interest, that is, of the relationship, and generally adjust their policy from the campaign rhetoric.
Thank you, Steve. It's been terrific having you on the show. I certainly learned a lot. I thought it was very insightful, so I really hope that you'll join us again in the near future.
My pleasure to be here. I enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you.